Welcome to the Jerome McClain Show. I'm your host, Jerome McClain, and let's get into our episode.
Intelligentsia, the endem of sarcasm, the nutty professor, to your whack-ass marmalade. It's T-Bone from T-Bone and Chick Brew in the Morning. Now available in podcast format. Simply search for the T-Bone and Chick Brew podcast, available wherever fine podcasts are sold.
As you have your seats in the presence of the Lord, I'm going to ask you to pray with me for this first anniversary Sunday's sermon on the theme, Nothing to Show for It. Turn to your neighbor, say, nothing to show for it. I was talking with a younger pastor just recently. In fact, it was 2 summers ago, July of 2004. And this younger pastor, felt like he was a failure in every aspect of his life. He had labored long, and he had done all he knew how to do. And he felt as if he had nothing to show for it. He had been at his church for 15 years. Pastor Junior had been here 10, along with his dad. And this pastor in another city had gone into ministry what I call the right way. After the Lord called him, he went and prepared himself academically and spiritually. He did not just turn his collar around and call himself bishop or apostle. He went to school and earned his degrees. He got a master's degree from Yale Divinity School, and while studying in school, he sat at the feet of one of this nation's most respected and revered pastors, a man who is the perfect combination of what Howard Thurman calls head and heart. A pastor with the highest academic degree and the deepest level of spirituality imaginable. And when this pastor, at whose feet the young pastor sat, speaks, you can feel the spray from the living waters of life that are drawn from a subterranean vault and a river that flows right past the throne of God. This younger pastor sat at his feet like Paul sat at the feet of Gamaliel, and he drank deep from the wells of wisdom that nourishes his pastor's soul. And yet, 15 years into his pastorate, he shared with me, his church had not only not blown up like Lance Watson's church in Richmond, Virginia, or Freddie Haynes' church in Dallas, Texas, or Cynthia Hale's church in Atlanta, Georgia, or Bethel Baptist Institutional Church here in Jacksonville. His church is so small that he cannot afford adequate health care coverage for his family. His church is so small that they do not pay into any kind of pension plan. His church is so small that he has to work at other jobs with a master's degree from Yale. And his church is so small that he cannot pay the tuition for his oldest son, he told me that July, who was starting college that August. He felt he had nothing to show for his efforts. His wife left him for another man, and he has custody of their 2 children, but he feels like he was failing as a father, just like he had failed as a pastor. And I talked long and laboriously with that young pastor because I could see things in his ministry that he could not see. Plus, I saw him trapped in that quicksand of comparison. When John Kenny and I were here with you at Bethel in the old church, John and I talked about that quicksand. John and I talk about it all of the time. When you start comparing what you've got with what somebody else has got, you are in a no-win situation. You have backed yourself into a corner from which there is no exit, and you have stepped over into some quicksand that will quickly pull you under and suffocate you in the pathos of a pity party. What you say? Hey, when you start comparing what you've got with what somebody else has got, you can't enjoy what you got because you're too busy looking at what somebody else has got. I shared with the Bethel family several years ago when I was here about this quicksand of comparison and how we always want to look at how the grass looks greener on the other side of the fence. Freddie Haynes, the real preacher who'll be in tonight, Freddie says that if the grass looks greener on the other side of the fence, it just might be because the water bill is higher on the other side of the fence. Somebody is paying a high price to keep up the appearances, but appearances can be deceiving. I told Freddie that if the grass looks green on the other side of the fence, and this goes for other folks' ministries and other folks' marriages. If the grass looks greener on the other side of the fence, you had better look again, and this time look carefully because it just might be artificial turf that you're looking at. You are looking at what you think is real, but it is phony, make-believe, and artificial. It ain't the real thing, and Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell told us years ago, what? Ain't nothing like the real thing. That's what Freddie Haynes said about grass looking green on the other side of the fence, comparing what you got to what somebody else got. And we have a son in the ministry, Ozzie Earl Smith. We went out to his church for his anniversary, and I preached that sermon at his church about comparing. And Dr. Smith went home to Memphis, Tennessee. He was so excited about my sermon and his anniversary. He told his mama what I preached word for word. And his mama said, you go back to Chicago and you tell Pastor Wright that sometimes the grass may look greener on the other side of the fence because the grass is sitting on top of a septic tank. And what you're looking at is a cover up on top of a whole tank full of poo-poo. And so when you start comparing what you've got with what somebody else has got, you've stepped over into some quicksand, the quicksand of comparison. And that quicksand, as I said a moment ago, will quickly pull you under and suffocate you in the pathos of a pity party. This young pastor was comparing his ministry with what he could see of other folks' ministries. He had labored long and he had done all he knew how to do, and he felt like he had nothing to show for it. Somebody look at me in Bethel this morning. You know exactly what that young pastor was feeling. You've done all you know how to do, and you feel like a failure in almost every aspect of your life. You put all you had to put into your marriage, and you've got nothing to show for it. There was no communication. You tried to talk, but you kept talking right past each other. And at times it seemed like you were speaking in two different languages. So you just shut down. He shut down, she gave up, and now you coexist in a quiet hell where don't nobody say nothing to nobody. Put all you had into your marriage, and you've got nothing to show for your effort. Somebody else, you put all you had to put into your job, and you've got nothing to show for your efforts. You hate to go to work, and you hate to go home. Feel like a failure in every area of your life. You put all you had into your parenting. You know, it's one thing to hear the heartbreaking stories of single parents single mothers and single fathers who did all they could with all they had, and the gangs won out over God.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Has anybody ever told you you were over opinionated? How about this one? You can talk about everything you like, but don't talk about religion. Don't talk about faith. Don't talk about politics. My name is Jerome McClain. This is the Jerome McClain Show, and I want to introduce you to a show called Over Opinionated with my friend from Southwest Virginia, Josh Scott. Josh has always been told he has been over opinionated. He always tried to hold back these opinions, but he tried to back them up when he had to say something with facts and logic. Since he's grown up in many ways, he had to change a lot of his views and his opinions, as a lot of people should. He's not a millionaire from Fox News or CNN. He's just a hard-working, blue-collar type of guy. Give Josh Scott a shot at Over Opinionated with Josh Scott. You can find him on patreon.com/overopinionated at 679. You can also check him out on Twitter at NRV_guy79. Overopinionated with Josh Scott, where he is this soft-spoken guy telling you the truth. We talk about a lot of serious topics on this show. One very serious topic is women's health. One company that stood out to me was vslay.com, because the owner is very transparent about her own struggles in the women's health department and has great customer service, great deals, and frequent sales. You can check her out, her great customer service, products about women's health, and frequent sales at www.vslay.com. That is www.vslay.com.
Cocaine won out over college. Crack won out over Christ. Jail won out over Jesus. It's sad enough to hear those stories and feel so helpless in the face of the statistics that are overwhelming us in this country. But when you hear a father from a two-parent household, like the one I heard, not this pastor, but another one, a two-parent household, he said to me, right, a lot of daddies ain't there for their kids. I was there. A lot of fathers would not support their children. I supported them financially. I supported them spiritually. I supported them psychologically from kindergarten through high school and college. I sacrificed for my children. I did without so that they could have. I paid tuition all by myself. I let my wife put all her money in her own account and do what she wanted to do. And now he said, I look at my children and my mind can't see anything in any of them except the word failure. One has a failed marriage. One has failed in school. One has failed in her fight against addiction. All of them, he said to me, give less than a damn about the church, and all of them were raised in the church. Where did I go wrong? What did I do wrong? He put all he had into his parenting, and he got nothing to show for it. Somebody looking at me right now, you know exactly what that young pastor was feeling. You labored long and you labored faithfully. You did all you knew how to do, and you feel like you have nothing to show for your efforts. Well, if that is how you're feeling, or if you know anything at all about how that feels like a failure, then perhaps you can relate to what it is Peter and his partners are feeling right here as we join them by the Sea of Tiberias in John 21. Simon Peter had to feel like his ministry was a failure. He started off with such great promise. Andrew, a disciple of John's, had come and got him and told him, we have found the Messiah. We have found the Christ. We have found the Anointed One. Andrew brought Simon to Jesus. And when Jesus saw Simon, Jesus looked at him and Jesus said, you are Simon, son of John. You are to be called Cephas, which is translated Peter. You know, Jesus can look at you and see stuff in you that you can't see, stuff that other folk can't see, stuff that the world cannot see. When Jesus looks at you, he is not interested in what you did that caused you to become what you have become. Jesus is only interested in what you can become and what you shall become if you hook up with him. And if you look at the text, he calls you when he says to Peter that your name is Simon, but you're going to be called Petrus, Peter. He is calling you in the now what you will be in the not yet. Jesus speaks into existence the positive plans he has for your future. He calls Simon now Cephas, which is what he will be later on. Cephas in Aramaic is the Greek word that Petros, from which we get Peter or rock. Now, if you fast forward from that meeting that they had, fast forward on the spiritual VCRs of your mind. Look at what happens when they come into the coast of Caesarea Philippi. Many years later, Jesus asks his disciples in Caesarea Philippi, whom do men say that I am? What are the people saying about me? Who do they think that I am? And the disciples said, well, some say Elijah, some say John the Baptist, some say Jeremiah or one of the prophets. Please notice those were all good things that they didn't tell him the dirty stuff that people saying about it. There were good things, but there were also spooky things. I mean, look at it. Elijah, that's a good thing. Elijah was Israel's mightiest prophet next to Moses. Jesus, they said to him, folk think you're a mighty prophet right up there next to Moses. John the Baptist, that's a good thing too. John was a preacher par excellence, and the crowds went out in great numbers to hear John. They were saying to him in so many words, Jesus, folk think you are a great preacher. You can draw crowds like Freddie Haynes or T.D. Jakes. Jeremiah, they said, some people think he's Jeremiah. Jeremiah, that's a good thing too. Jeremiah in the Bible was a flat-footed prophet standing smack dab in the middle of a tradition whose allegiance was to God and not to government. I know you're not going to believe this, but there were some preachers in the Bible. There used to be some preachers in the Bible, back in Jeremiah's day in the Bible, whose allegiance was to the government and not to God. They cared more about money than mercy. They cared more about a payday than the poor. They cared more about jewelry than justice. And they said whatever the party line was so as not to upset the government. I know you're not going to believe that. That's way back. That's way back. Way back. Way back. Way back. Bernie Mac said long time ago. Long time ago. That's way back before Eddie Long would not let Harry Belafonte come to his church because he wanted President Bush's church. Ooh, allegiance was to the government, not to God. Way long time ago. That was then. Whatever, not Jeremiah, though. They said, Jesus, some people think you Jeremiah. Jeremiah, in the Bible, stood flat-footed, and Jeremiah stood smack dab in the middle of a prophetic tradition whose allegiance was to God and not to government. And they said to him, Jesus, some folks think you're a minister who cares about people and not the president. Some folk, Jesus, think you are a minister who will critique the government's policies even when it is not popular and even if it lands you up in jail. These are great things that they're saying about you, Jesus. But I say that you notice there are also spooky things that they're saying. But why spooky, Reverend? Well, Elijah's dead. John the Baptist is dead. Jeremiah been dead. So they're saying there's something about you, Jesus, that's sort of spooky when you speak. It's like a voice from the other side. But then Jesus flipped the script on him. Jesus said, okay, that's who they say I am. Now you tell me who you say that I am. And Simon answered, you are the Christ, Son of the living God. And Jesus said, blessed are you, Simon, son of John, for flesh and blood has not revealed this unto you, but my Father which is in heaven. And I say unto you that you are Petros, you are Peter, you are the rock, and upon this rock I will build my church. Jesus told him on the day that he met him, I see something in you that you can't see. You are to become Cephas, or Peter the rock. Peter's ministry had started off, Simon's, with such great promise. He had been there on the Mount of Transfiguration. He had been there in the Garden of Gethsemane. He had pulled his sword to protect the Prince of Peace, but something happened. Something always seems to happen, doesn't it? Something happened, and not only had he failed in his ministry, he'd also failed in the area of loyalty. Here was a man who had changed his life, and he let him down. Here is the man who had rearranged his destiny, and he had denied him. Not once, not twice, but what? 3 times. Here's the man who had taken him from being a fisherman to being a fisher of men, and he had failed him. Written all across his resume in bright red letters, as red as the blood that flowed from Calvary, was the word failure. Simon Peter had to feel like his ministry was a failure. Look who else is there. Thomas said, Thomas the twin. The man who said, unless I see the nail prints and put my hands in the wounds, I will not believe it. Thomas the twin had called the Christ my Lord and my God, but he also heard the Lord say, yeah, Thomas, you believe because you've seen. Blessed are those who will believe and who have never seen and will never have seen. And that thing had to eat at Thomas. I only believe because I had to see. The tradition teaches that we walk by faith and not by sight. But most of us, we walk by sight. And then we have faith. Look who else is there by the Sea of Tiberias. Nathanael of Cana. The man whom Philip found and the one who signified on the Savior before he ever saw the Savior. Can anything good come out of Nazareth? Jesus, when he saw Nathanael, complimented him. Nathanael, before he ever saw the Lord, laid eyes on him, criticized him. That had to haunt his memory. Look who else is there by the Sea of Tiberias. James and John, the sons of Zebedee, the sons of thunder, the ones called Boanerges, the ones who wanted to rain down fire on a Samaritan town, and the two who selfishly tried to carve out a niche for themselves while cutting out old big mouth Peter. You remember what they did? They stepped to Jesus and said, look here, G. When you come into your kingdom, can you hook a brother up? You ever said stuff or done stuff that you're sorry you said and sorry you did and wish you'd never said it or done it? Because in your solitude, in the quiet time, in the in-between times, and there's no action going on, in the waiting period between the promise and the fulfillment of the promise, that's when that stuff starts to surface, and the thoughts of failure will not leave you alone. That's when it's easy to make a mistake and end up in the quicksand of comparison. That's when you start to question yourself, second guess yourself, come down on yourself. And the text teaches that is also the time when you attempted to fall back on what you know. Turn to your neighbor and say, fall back on what you know. Turn on the other side and say, fall back on the familiar. That's what happens in the text. They fall back on the familiar. Now, some of y'all looking at me funny. Like you don't know what fall back on the familiar is. You got some numbers programmed in your cell phone right now that should have been deleted. But that's the familiar you can go back to if this don't work here. And don't think them code names you got them under fool nobody either. Fall back on the familiar. The ministry ain't working. Got nothing to show for my effort. The marriage ain't working. Got nothing to show for my effort. The job ain't working. The relationship ain't working. This parenting thing ain't nothing working. So I'm going to go back to what I know. I'm going to fall back on the familiar. Look what Peter said. Peter said, I'm going fishing. Right. Fishing, I know. I'm familiar with that. And his partner said, we going with you, handing up on your business. Text says they went out. Got into the boat, fished all night long, and they caught nothing. Look at this text. My ministry is a failure. My loyalty is a failure. I fall back on what I know, and that don't work. They fished all night long and had nothing to show for their efforts. You've done all you know how to do. You've even fallen back on the familiar and gone back to doing what you used to do. And you have nothing to show for your efforts, and you feel like a failure. That's where this young pastor was I was talking to 2 years ago. That's where Peter, Nathanael, Thomas, James, and John are, and that's where somebody in Bethel this morning is. When your partners with you cannot help you. With experience and expertise combined. Peter was a seasoned fisherman. James and John had a daddy who owned a fishing business. They grew up on the sea. They had experience, they had expertise, but even with experience and expertise, they still came up empty. They had nothing to show for their efforts after fishing all night long. Sometimes, even with the combined experience and expertise, in your pocket, you still come up empty. Now look at what the text says. When everything is going wrong, nothing ain't working, nothing going right. Look at the text. Just after daybreak, Jesus shows up. Just after daybreak, Jesus stood on the beach, but the disciples did not know that was his Jesus. Sometimes when Jesus shows up, he don't even... Reverend Dr. Rudolph McKissick, Jr., I know that over 20 years of ministry, there have been times when you felt like you had nothing to show for it. Oh, the folk here see you in one light. But back in Richmond, you were compared to Paul Nichols, compared to your father-in-law. You could never measure up. In Toledo, you had saints who didn't want to praise God, but wanted to shut down the Holy Ghost. And here you come, unappreciated, too loud, too country. A pig in minx clothing, degrees in opera, hooping like you done lost your mind, got nothing to show for. Then you come home. Oh, daddy happy, mama happy, but I know what they're saying, but you never will be your daddy. You will always be little Rudy. You'll always be Pastor Junior. You'll always be playing second fiddle. You feel at times, you've got to feel that you have nothing to show for it. You preach a Virginia Union University School of Theology, Samuel Lewis Proctor Gospel. That ain't wanted down here in Jacksonville. Why don't you stick to preaching Jesus? That means sex, who getting some, who not getting, none of the homosexuals. That's the full gospel. Stop talking about the government. Preach the gospel. You in the heart of Bush territory. Jeb and George W. And you preaching about breaking the bonds of slave mentality. You talked about, you lied on, you laughed at, you dismissed. But Jesus shows up to tell you this morning that you care for your nephew. He cares. Sometimes when Jesus shows up, you don't even know that it's Jesus. He showed up in this young pastor's life that I started telling you about. He showed up while I was there with him in a letter from a member who had just finished med school. I was with him in July. The member had finished in May. The member had been a preteen, 12 years old when the pastor went to the church. And because the pastor poured himself into the life of a poor black ghetto kid with one parent and bad English like Bill Cosby criticized, the girl began to believe in herself. And 15 years later, while the pastor was comparing his ministry to Lance Watson's ministry, comparing his ministry to Freddie Haynes' ministry, comparing his ministry to Cynthia Hale's ministry, comparing his ministry to Rudolph McKissick's ministry, the Lord was sending a letter to a laborer in God's vineyard who felt like a failure. The letter came the week that I was there. And the letter said, "Dear Pastor, because you believed in me, because you taught me to believe in myself, I have just finished my residency and I am coming home to make sure some other black child becomes all that God has placed within them to become." "Thank you, Pastor," she said. "My life will never be the same because of you." Jesus showed up and he didn't even recognize you. Jesus showed up to say in so many words, "I didn't call you to be successful. I called you to be faithful, and you have been faithful. I didn't call you to blow up. I called you to stand up. Stand up for justice. Stand up for truth. Stand up for black people. Stand up for what is right. Stand up for the least of these, my little ones." Jesus shows up, and if you keep on reading in this John text, you will see once again that whenever Jesus shows up, what does Jesus do? Showed out. They caught
so many fish that they couldn't even get them into the boat. And guess what else the letter said? The letter said, because I got full fellowships and scholarships as a result of your teaching me to use my mind and not be ashamed of being intelligent. She said, I made it through med school without the huge debt that some of my classmates have. And I understand, Pastor, she said, that your son is supposed to start college this August. So as my way of saying thank you, and I hope you don't mind, I want to pay for your son's college, to pay you back for all that you've done for me. She said, and I figured that you might object because you're too proud or you're too macho. That's a man thing I never will understand. She said, but I figured you might say no. So I found out from my mama where your boy is going, and I've already paid for the first 2 years. Thank you, Pastor, because if you hadn't helped me, I would not be in a position to help somebody else. Jesus showed up, and Jesus showed up when ain't nothing working, when nothing is going. Jesus will show up. Pastor McKinsey, that's all we want you to know, is that he can. You think you can't make it? You think it's all in vain? Oh, no. He cares for you. He cares. Somebody else needs to know that. Turn this Sunday, turn to your neighbor and say, he cares. Come on and say it like you mean it. Now let me tell you something, when you see his hand of mercy, when you look back over your life and see his footfalls, don't even try to figure it out. Just thank and praise it out and shout it out. Say, thank you for keeping me when I didn't feel like I could make it. Thank you for holding on to me when I wanted to let go. Thank you for caring for me when I could not see how any good could come out of this situation. Come on and stand to your feet. We're going to come back to that. He can. Turn back to your neighbor and say, he can. For you, doors of the church are open this Sunday. The doors of the church are open. Come on, from wherever you are, turn back to your neighbor and say, I've been talking to you the whole service. I don't even know your name. Find out your neighbor's name.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Of course, if you want to support the show, you can do so by going to www.patreon.com and getting a membership for as little as $3 a month. Again, that's www.patreon.com/The Jerome McClain Show. The Jerome McClain Show is fully listener-supported, independent media that won't lead you to tribalism. Get a membership and support independent media at www.patreon.com/The Jerome McClain Show.